proportion of students that just don't test well, period. They're bright, they're smart, but they just don't test well. They don't learn from a book. So when we talk about experiential learning, I mean, for me, that's huge. So my question is, we're doing an awful lot of discussion around assessment, but how valid is this data if we already know that a lot of these kids don't learn that way anyway, and now we're measuring them. We're measuring this data. How valid is it?
Because Anne and I are old enough to remember a generation of kids who couldn't possibly be critical thinkers because they couldn't construct a sentence that said what they meant. You know, I'm serious now. I had to teach my own son grammar in university so he could pass because he couldn't write an essay. And that was a real problem in our school system. And he was an A student. And I'll tell you another thing that was going on at that time. And maybe we're overcorrecting with all these assessments, but I'm saying there was a correction was necessary. Before Ames came along, it was doing its school-by-school studies and comparing schools and getting people all riled up. The universities were doing their own. And I saw some of them, and these were never public. And they knew what, you know, an A meant from Copwood Educational Center, and what it meant from the Halifax Grammar School, and what it meant from the Sydney Academy. And they did not mean anywhere near the same thing. They knew who they were going to let into their universities because they knew what school they came from and what kind of marks they had. And they were making these judgments way below anybody's radar. You know, and I saw some of these things, and I was absolutely shocked. Now, I'm not sure that they still do them, or if they do, they certainly don't want them FOIPOP'd. They don't want anyone applying for freedom of information. But in terms of kids being able to succeed beyond the public school system, the institutions of higher learning were making all these judgments, you know, that other people, you know, weren't aware of, you know, and they knew who was in their huge Christmas dropout rate failures of kids who'd actually paid money to go to university and couldn't even get as far as Christmas because they couldn't read well enough, actually. So there were passionate people who put in testing because there wasn't any. So now maybe there's too much. So I don't know. It's just still, in my opinion, we should be talking about.
The assessment is a kind of lowest common denominator solution. You know, are there, Anne, teachers who are not doing their job in some way or another? You know, I'm sure we could have a lot of debate over that. Of course there are some teachers who are doing that, right? But is the solution then to assess everyone to make sure everything is going to some kind of standard, or is it to create better conditions to attract and retain good teachers and then get the heck out of their way so that they can do their job, right? I mean, in my department, there's a professor who walked off all the time with paper clips from the office, okay, and stationery and stuff. So a new memo went around with a huge policy saying that all the supplies have now been moved, okay, into the secretarial office, and you have to file a form in triplicate to get a goddamn box of paper clips, right? So, and you know, did this improve? You know, it was a policy that went to the lowest common denominator of this one person who was taking paper clips, right? Instead of dealing with the fact that why do we have someone on our faculty who feels the need to steal paper clips, or, you know, letting him steal the paper clips and going on. And so what I worry about is that the policies we're doing, first of all, as Mary Lou pointed out, have a deprofessionalization of teaching. You know, the northern teachers, I'm not sure about Anne's specific example, but what she said was that they said they didn't know how to create a grammatical sentence in the way that the EQAO demanded, okay? And I was very interested in that last part of the sentence. Are there teachers up there who don't know how to speak English, or who don't know how to teach their children how to speak English, or French, or whatever it is? Or are there teachers up there who don't know how to teach those students how to perform well on the tests so that they can raise their scores so that we have the data, as the questioner asked, and be politically viable, right, in the field? If there are teachers who don't speak English or don't know how to teach their teachers to speak English, I would say put our resources into teacher education and to getting rid of those teachers and attracting teachers by raising salaries salaries and by increasing working conditions. There is no other profession that I can think of where the emphasis is on gatekeeping and assessing to the exclusion of simply improving the working conditions of teachers. This is, again, not as true in Canada as in the United States, but the money, but it is true, but the money that goes into the assessment, I just wonder what other ways that could be spent to increase the attractiveness of the teaching profession so that we wouldn't have to say, well, should we use a carrot or a stick or clobber people over the head or give merit pay or, how do we get these deadbeats to work? Well, are there that many deadbeats in the system? I don't know. If there are, then we're not making it an attractive enough place to work. Let them get a job somewhere else, right? And I don't want to get into a political discussion about the union and job protection, but the point is that I think I would rather see our resources spent on making the classroom a place where teachers, as professionals, can do their job and then get out of their way.
It's been suggested a couple times that the tests span along, 2-3 weeks, that test preparation takes up all time and other curriculum is thrown out the window. That just simply does not take place in Nova Scotia. We emphasize, or certainly if it does take place, we certainly don't recommend it. All of our documents speak about if you're teaching the curriculum, your students will do fine on the test, on the assessment. So because our assessments are based upon the curriculum. So some of these notions of reducing the professional judgment or lessening the professional judgment of teachers simply do not apply in our approach. And the last point I'd like to make is your point about resources. If you have a limited pool of resources, how much of that pool should be allocated to creating the tests and divisions versus supporting teachers in the classroom? And I can say that what we put towards the creation of the assessments themselves is a very small portion of what then turns into the system. We argue that our assessments pull resources into the classroom, into the system. So over the years, we've identified certain areas of need in the system, and we have provided funding for literacy mentors, for example. So that's just one example of the millions of dollars that come from an assessment that's actually $1.25 for the booklet, pulls in millions of dollars that directly result in students being supported. So the notion of all these resources being expended on the assessment, it's a limited amount of resources, and also it's tremendous professional development for the teachers who participate in the creation of the assessment, the marking of the assessment. The marking session's coming up, and I have to turn away markers because they so much want to be part of the marking session. Thousands of teachers have participated, have been banging on our doors to participate in the assessment creation, administration, and scoring. So it's led to very positive things, and it's drawn a lot of resources into the system.